And I would just like to welcome everyone to SmartBear's presentation for Collaborator today for code review in an agile environment. We've got a few housekeeping items. As I mentioned, the session is being recorded. There is a Q&A channel in Zoom that you can post your questions to, so please feel free to do that. We'll answer those as we can during the presentation. And then we'll also have a Q&A session at the end. So my name is Mel Gage. I'm a solutions engineer supporting Collaborator here at SmartBear, and joining me today is Jonathan Fortunati. He's my manager in solutions engineering and is more of an expert on the Agile workflow than I am. So I'm happy to have him here today to discuss what we're looking forward to on how Collaborator can benefit your Agile workflows and seamlessly drop in to make sure you're getting those peer reviews done and ensuring you get that good code quality throughout your process.
Hi, everybody.
So SmartBear was founded in 2009. Just a little information. We are a global organization. We have over 22,000 customers and 6.5 million users across our product suite, which is very extensive. We can fill in and fit your needs in just about any section of your design, the testing and monitoring for all of your software needs. Swagger Hub and the API development, behavior-driven design with our Cucumber Studio, and what we're talking about today is Collaborator. And we put that in the create section of our workflow, but Collaborator really does fit across a lot of the other areas as well. When we're talking about design, we can do requirements reviews with design documents before we even get into the creation and the testing phases. You can also put your test plans in there for review, in addition to doing your code reviews once you're complete with your code and trying to move that through your process. So, visit smartbear.com and take a look at any of the other applications we have available that might benefit your workflows in your organizations. So today's agenda, we're going to do a quick review on the Agile process. Then we're going to touch on peer review challenges in today's Agile environment. We'll talk about how Collaborator Workflow integrates into that environment, and then we'll end up with that Q&A session, as I mentioned earlier. So reviewing our Agile process. So the Agile Manifesto was published in the early 2000s, and it was a framework on how to go through software development. And it had several key points to make that software development, your software development lifecycle, very streamlined and very quick, and also make it very flexible to those high demand environments. And some of those key points, were to satisfy customers through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And you want to make sure that that software does get to your customers as bug-free as possible. And Collaborator dropping into that process helps you shift those discoveries, those bug discoveries, to the left. And what we mean by that is the earlier you introduce peer review into your software development lifecycle, the earlier you catch those bugs, the less it's going to cost you in the long run from sending out buggy software, as well as saving those development dollars and catching it later in the process, requiring sometimes extensive rework. Agile also welcomes changing requirements. Collaborator is very flexible in that workflow as well, and delivering software frequently, from very short life cycles to longer life cycles lasting out up to a couple months. Again, Collaborator fits into all those workflows. When we're talking about collaboration in the Agile, we're also expecting our developers to be trusted to get the job done. But having that additional set of eyes around peer review and working and trusting them to work independently is where Collaborator comes to the table with a solution that lets anybody do code review from wherever they are. And you can make that seamless and a very light lift for all of your coders by creating reviews and sending them out and having your developers come in for those code reviews without having to set meetings, without having to send out a lot of emails and generate a lot of additional traffic. It gives you that flexibility to work wherever you need to and trust your developers to get their jobs done.
And part of the trust that's necessary for a process like Agile to be really effective, I shouldn't say a process like Agile, to kind of adopt a workflow or adopt maybe a development practice like Agile, comes with that collaboration piece, because the more people collaborate, the more they see each other's work and the more they learn off each other and understand that, yes, I trust that my peer is actually producing high quality work. And the more that they can talk and communicate and see each other, the more likely they are to trust each other. And that's really important, that if you want to have a successful Agile workflow process, that you're having that collaboration piece to make that effective.
Exactly. So some of the additional principles when they talk about efficiency of conveying information within development teams is face-to-face conversations. Obviously, we're experiencing some challenges with this concept in today's environment. Many of us are working from home under the current requirements under COVID-19 that the government's come down. And so having those face-to-face conversations is difficult now. We do have applications like Zoom, like we're using today. Our team uses this internally to do conversations. But in order to enforce and to make collaboration easy, Collaborator gives you those that easy to access interface for your code reviews.
Yeah.
And
sorry.
Okay. No, go ahead.
I think this one's interesting to me because it's not that you need to have face-to-face conversation. It's just face-to-face conversation is the easiest form of communication, obviously. And you just have to work harder the less face-to-face conversation you have. But eventually that work becomes easy. As you get used to communicating over tools like Slack, like we all are now, it becomes easier to maintain the same quality of relationships without the face-to-face conversation.
Okay. Well, and if we're going through these key Agile principles, I'm going to go ahead and put up one of our poll questions. Do you work in Agile teams now? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. And we'll leave that up for a few minutes as we talk through some of our additional points. So again, working software is the primary goal for all of our organizations. We want to put out a good product. We want to put out a product that doesn't have defects and bugs in it. And that's where peer review is so important. And again, I mentioned shifting left. The earlier we introduce peer review and catch those defects, the easier it is to get out that working software. Collaborator also gives you functionality and reporting and metrics to measure that progress, to see what types of defects you're catching, where they're being caught in the process, and help you understand the nature of your software development teams and how to make improvements in your processes. I'm not seeing any responses on the polls. Is everyone able to see the polls? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it says people have voted.
All right. It's just not showing up in real time as I was seeing it this morning.
You may have a setting that doesn't show the results until the end, even for us apparently.
All right. So we'll give that about another minute, and then we'll share those results. So with Agile processes, they're looking to do a sustainable deployment and maintain that constant pace indefinitely. I think there's a double-edged sword to that. But when you're doing those development cycles and you're getting into those sprints where maybe something's been found by a customer and reported as a major bug on your software, and you need to put in those sprints, Collaborator fits into that short-term process as well. But with continuous attention to technical excellence and good design, enhancing agility, and maximizing the amount of work not done, and keeping things simple is what Agile is all about. And we want to show you how Collaborator can fit right into your processes.
on that second to last one, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design. We actually had someone that we worked with, one of our customers, who I believe he was like an architect or a director of development, but he stopped his day job. He got permission to stop his day job, and all he did was perform reviews for, I think it was like a 6-month period on his teams, because he was working with a lot of lesser experienced junior developers, people just out of college who just don't have the professional experience. And what he would do when he would leave feedback on reviews, he would not only say like, hey, the way you implemented this method or what you did here could be done better, he would leave links to resource materials, reference materials. And at his desk, he would have all these books that he was referencing. And part of the expectation for these employees was to come and find the reference material, read about his comments, understand through the reference material why he made that comment. And within a pretty rapid time, it got to a point where they were measuring how often they had to refactor their code base. And it went from doing a refactor of almost like 90% of their code base every 6 months to being like something like 20% of their code base every year. So a huge change.
That's great. I shared the poll results, and my screen is still showing everything is 0. So I'm hoping everybody else can see how the poll actually came out. John, can you by chance see that?
No, I actually got an error message. I tried to click the button as well, and it says failed to share poll result, error 4402. So,
well, I hope you
looks like
folks
Zoom
can
is
see the
having some issues.
results, because unfortunately my poll's not working for me. Well, we will move on to our next topic, where we're going to talk about peer review challenges in today's Agile environment. So we look at self-forming teams and collective ownership and cross-functional teams requiring more on collaboration. You know, you've got to get those additional eyes on your code when you're writing them, especially if you're working in individual pieces of your development process where teams aren't necessarily, they're working on the same end result, but they're working on, you don't see the results either. Thanks, David, appreciate that. Let's see, I'm not sure what's,
I think at the end of the webinar, we get an email that has the results in it. Seems like Zoom's having an issue, but assuming that we get those results, it doesn't have an issue there as well. Maybe we can email those out to everybody for those who are interested, just to see what people are doing out there.
Okay, thanks, John. So with like I was saying, with cross-functional teams, it does require that additional collaboration. You may be working on different parts of the same end product, and being able to communicate between those teams and make sure that you're working towards the same end goal, and understanding how some of those individual components work together is so important, and why the collaboration is important. It's dependent on internal and external feedback. So we're looking for those extra sets of eyes on our code and on our requirements documents. And it's welcome to changing your requirements in new directions. So you might need to be able to turn your development process on a dime in changing markets. I know that talking to some of the folks that we've been on the phone over the last couple of weeks while we've all been at home, everything's gone 180. Products that they expected that would be big sellers in this quarter, they've had to switch development and go to things that are more looked for in today's type of environment where everybody is more isolated. So they've had to do those quick and rapid changes, but you still have to maintain the quality, especially in a environment where things are changing quickly.
And I think an interesting one is the collective ownership here. And that's something that peer review really helps with, because the more people that are participating in the peer review, the more they're building their T-shaped skills. Maybe people are familiar with that, where you have your primary skill set and then you have the T-shaped skills, so things that you're kind of familiar with but isn't your daytime job. And then you have the pole of the T, that's your daytime job. But it broadens your T the more that you participate in reviews. And that's helpful, because if something happens and you have to take over work for, let's say, a colleague who switches teams, now you can do that, and you already have your foot in the water, right? Your foot in the door, maybe, to start learning about those things and start working. It's not completely new to you.
All right, John, we do have a question on the Q&A. How good for product-based organizations is it to adapt Agile methodologies given that we focus mostly on research-oriented projects? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts on that. So if we go back to the principles, it's important to remember that the principles aren't necessarily rules that you have to follow. They're more like guidelines. And really what we're trying to do here is just build a self-sustaining team that doesn't get too bogged down by following a plan and is able to react to changing environments, right? So the original Agile movement was started when software development teams were working in a project environment, and they were saying, we're going to deliver this software in 18 months. And at the start of the project, they worked with the customer and said, these are the 100 things that we're going to build in those 18 months, and that's what we're going to deliver in 18 months. And then they deliver it, and then those requirements, those 100 pieces of functionality, no longer are applicable, right? Maybe only 60% of them are applicable. Trying to avoid those situations. And that really can be applied to anywhere. You know, it can be applied to cleaning your house. I could say that out of all the things I want to clean in my house today, you know, I could create a list of the entire house, and then I could just try to chip it away the entire day, or I could start with small chunks. Let's just start with the living room and do everything in the living room. And then if we have time, maybe we move to the kitchen, but maybe the kitchen's no longer as important because maybe my plans change for that night and people aren't coming over anymore, right? So definitely. And how it would work in like a resource-oriented project could look different, but again, it's the principles. It's kind of following those guidelines and just working in a more iterative approach and making sure that people are taking collective ownership and talking about things that really those are the benefits you're going to get. And those are, like I said, applicable anywhere.
Yeah, and anecdotally from David Kramer on the chat, he says that he's implemented Agile in an R&D environment. And it's a great fit because you can update your plan after each experiment. It does require a shift to smaller experiments, much like what we see in smaller bites of code, smaller development chunks of code, but that it does fit into an R&D environment as well. Thanks, David. Appreciate the input. So some additional challenges that we're seeing, and this is, again, relevant to why we're all here today on Zoom, and I'm working in my office at home, and John's working at his office at home, and my assumption is that the majority of the folks on the call today are actually in their offices at home as well. We're looking at geographically distributed development teams, and this is how Collaborator, as a central server type of solution, becomes very easily integrated into your processes. We have isolated and disconnected developers. They're working out of their home offices, and they need this type of platform for collaboration where you can drop some code into Collaborator and start those conversations as you're going through your peer reviews. And you know, a lot of organizations don't have a cohesive system that brings together all of this information in one place, and that's what Collaborator does. So instead of sending out those emails and hoping that everybody's looking at the exact same piece of code, you've got it all that information, all of your requirements documents. You can put those right into the reviews in Collaborator and keep all that information within the server.
One thing I recommend for a peer review process, whether you're doing it through Collaborator or something else, if you're doing Scrum and you have sprints or doing some other methodology that has like that kind of time-boxed events, at the end of the sprint, at the end of the story, to have a review that looks at everything that needs to be delivered, the definition of done basically, right? Have that be your review. So not just the code, but you have all your tests and are all your tests passing? Do you have all your updates to your documentation? Has your product person looked over the code to make sure that the requirements are actually being met? Like having that checkpoint before you call something done can be super helpful for your team. It's going to help reduce technical debt.
Great. We did have another question come in the Q&A. How can we best use Collaborator when we're reviewing code that isn't necessarily in a text format? For example, Simulink modules. I personally am not familiar with what the Simulink modules look like, what type of code those are in. I can
take that, Mel, if you want.
Oh, please, John.
Yeah, so I have some experience with Simulink from a past life in electrical engineering. So Simulink is a little tough. So Collaborator supports PDF and image files in the diff viewer, which means that you could review a PDF and an image file, and you can export Simulink models in PDF and image files. But if you have a nested Simulink model where you can really drill down into your model, then it does become difficult at some point, because you have to keep on reviewing or uploading rather, all these different levels of your model. And this kind of goes back to the question of the research environment, breaking up your reviews and breaking up your development chunks into small chunks. Maybe you just work on the development of one piece of your model, and it will make the testing part easier, the creation part easier, and the review part, as a byproduct, would be easier as well.
Great. And then a follow-on question: is there a way to visually identify within Collaborator areas of code to focus on in a given peer review? So internally, we have options within our development team when they're doing their code review in Collaborator, and we do use it internally. Our developers, when they're making changes in a code, so first off, you're going to get some visual indication in the diff viewer as to what code has changed. But additionally, our developers will go into the chat window for a particular piece of code or a particular code file and leave notes as to what they've done and what they've changed, so that the reviewers, when they're looking at it, can look at that synopsis real quick and say, okay, I know what I'm looking at. They can look at the diff viewer, see the highlighted areas that have changed, and then go on with their review. So Collaborator Workflow integration into this Agile environment that we've been talking about, what does that look like? So how does Collaborator help? Well, we support that Agile cadence. Like I said, we're going to show you some tools and some ways to set up Collaborator today that makes Collaborator a very hands-off process to just drop it right into your Agile workflows. Again, it helps you identify those defects earlier for less time and rework. Again, shifting left, reducing those costs of development, reducing those costs of redevelopment if your defects get to the wild, so to speak. We do support the evolution of a collaborative culture. So we've got your development teams working together, looking at code. It's great for mentorships. If you've got new developers coming in, you can assign them roles into the reviews and get them looking at code and understanding what it is that your process entails and what your products look like as they're learning and developing code with you. Well, we provide a single source of truth. So we have many customers that are regulated industries, and Collaborator gives you that single source of truth in the database for every review you've done. So auditing that comes in and requires that you show proof of peer review on your code, Collaborator gives you that functionality in the database. And then we're going to talk on some of the streamlining functionality. You can do code review checklists. Subscriptions is one that I'm really big on as somebody that is generating a lot of reviews, mostly in a demo environment. But I can do some subscriptions around reviews. So if someone is a particular author and you want a particular group assigned based on authorship, or even file or even templates, you can assign groups automatically for review pools, and we'll show you how that works. And then again, review pools to distribute your workload, and automatic notifications that go out to your teams when reviews are created, and just to keep you in the loop and keep that whole process frictionless by dropping Collaborator in there and getting your peer reviews done. So Collaborator Workflow, when we're looking at your basic workflow in the Agile environment, we can drop in as early as sprint planning. We support document review, and if you've got your documents and you need to check requirements, generate a review for those. Get everybody collaborating on the requirements documents before you even start your next sprint. Make sure everybody's working towards the same goals and understand what those goals are. And then as we go through, we're doing our development and dropping in those code reviews through the sprint review. We can generate the code reviews and then generate those metrics documents in the retrospective to go back and look and see how our sprint went, and look at what might need to be updated, what might need to be changed in your process.
This is actually how our dev team works, the Collaborator dev team, at least for new features. When the sprint starts and they start working on a story, the first thing they do is open a review. They open a pull request, and then that opens the review. And then all the artifacts throughout the dev process, like I said, tests, stock updates, wireframes for UX, all of that's uploaded into the review.
And the Collaborator review process internal to the server. Somebody starts a review, the author makes changes to some code files, participants are added, and then everybody takes a look at those files and adds their comments and defects, changes are made, and it cycles through that rework and inspection process until everybody's happy with the code. And Collaborator allows you to set up however it needs to be for your workflows. If you want multiple reviewers on individual reviews, you can manage all that through settings within Collaborator, within roles, within templates that define what goes on within the review. And finally, we're going to demonstrate some features of Collaborator today that we've touched on. I've done a little bit of pre-setup, and I'm going to step out to my GitLab repository. And basically what we're going to do today is I'm just going to make a quick change and in my development branch, and then we're going to do a merge request into master. And what we're going to demonstrate today, and I'll show you in Collaborator itself. I'll log into my account. So some of the functionalities that we've talked about as we're going through this process has to do with the pools and setting up some subscriptions. I'm just going to show you real quick where we can configure those. In our Collaborator groups, I've set up a test group that is my pool group. And we talked a little bit about subscriptions, and this is one of the key features that make this a frictionless process as we're going through our review. So in this particular case, I've set up this review pool under my authorship. So if I create any review within Collaborator, it's automatically going to assign my Mel test group as a reviewer role. There are currently 4 users assigned to that group, and with my subscription, I'm going to require one of those users to pick that pool up. And where this is great functionality is it allows you to send out notifications to everybody in the group, and yet if workloads are heavy amongst some individuals, but somebody has time in bandwidth in order to pick up that review, they can simply grab that review and take it off of everyone else's plates. That doesn't mean those other individuals couldn't log in and do the review. There's just not a requirement. So on that note, we're going to just make a quick change. I'm actually going to go to my development branch, and I'm just going to make a quick edit on my file. And we're going to create a pull request. And we talked about those Collaborator repository integrations. So I'm linked here in GitLab directly back to my Collaborator server. So all of this is going to generate a review seamlessly through webhook integrations. So I don't have to do anything in Collaborator to begin this review process. So I'm going to commit my change, and then I'm going to generate a pull request comparing my development branch to my master branch. So I'll create my pull request, and what we're going to see is we're going to come up and we're going to get that Collaborator link directly back into the server itself. So GitLab is keeping track of what's going on, or pardon me, GitHub. GitLab works the same way. It's keeping track of what's going on in my workflow. And we'll see here that I actually have a requirement for my code review. So with my GitHub settings, I can use Collaborator as a gate to say, I can't merge this code until my review is done. So it makes sure that you're getting those reviews done and ensuring that quality. We get a link directly to the review, and we can click on that, and it'll take us directly into the review. And we're in our Collaborator server, ready to start work. Now, one of the functionalities that I wanted to point out that we did with the subscriptions is because of my authorship, my test group has been assigned as my review pool in the review role. With a little bit of additional functionality, you could set up a trigger within Collaborator to make this even more frictionless, to go ahead and push this review to the annotation phase. Actually, it's done that here in GitLab, or pardon me, in GitHub. So I'm already in my annotation phase. I can make changes if I'd like, if I want to change the setup in my review, but I'm already moved from my original planning stage to my annotation phase. At this point, my review pool has received emails saying there's review work ready to be done. We can see that my file is attached, and we get a quick matrix showing what's been changed in the file since our last merge request.
And what this means for the review author, if you're an author of the review, it means you don't have to do anything when this review starts. It just will start automatically for you right into inspection. And that's important because a lot of times we see this tension between the actual reviewers and the authors and the people doing the reviews, and maybe management who's looking to have this kind of process in place so they can get all the benefits of workflows and reporting. The people, the frontline people doing the work are saying, hey, this is kind of a bit of overhead. This reduces all the overhead for you, so you can still get all that reporting and all that benefit without any of the overhead.
Great point. And that's one of the great functionalities with the subscriptions. Take that overhead, and that's one of the biggest kind of pushbacks we get. It's like, well, I don't want to add anything extra to my process. Well, here we're not really doing that. We're creating the reviews fairly seamlessly. So if I go to my review account and we'll look at my home screen, we'll see that my review account has that review already in its action items list. And here's where we can see it's part of a pool. This reviewer has been invited to participate. All of the other members of that same team also received the same action item in their list, also with the invitation to participate. And to pick up the review in this particular this account, I simply log into the review. I can see new information highlighted in yellow, so I can see that we're attached to this pull request, and I do have a link directly back out to the pull request if I need more information. But we'll have this little icon here that allows my account to take this review and run with it. So by selecting this, we'll see that it automatically put my author into the waiting status. So now my author, depending on your level of notifications, has gotten an email saying your review's been picked up for processing. And just to show you back in my author account, we'll see that they're waiting and that the review has moved from the annotation phase where we were waiting for someone to pick up the review to the inspection phase. And so now we'll cycle through inspection and rework as we go through the process of reviewing our code files. So back in my inspection phase, we can take a look at the code file that we've been asked to review. And this goes back to the question that was asked earlier. Is there a quick way to see what we're looking at as far as changes in the code files? And we can see here in our diff viewer that it highlights in red items that have been deleted and in green new information. And if we've made changes to any lines but not deleted it, those would be highlighted in yellow. So you do have this color coding that gives you very quick visual references as to what's changed in your code. Marking up defects and items of interest in the diff viewer is as simple as selecting a line, and we can leave a comment like this, and we can simply add that as a comment. And for those of you that are in regulated industries and you need that information, then it's all stored in the database with the user and the date and timestamp that comments were left. I want to mark a defect. It's a similar process. We'll start that conversation at that line. And I can leave the comment and add this as a review defect, or as we like to refer to them as action items. And this button is customizable, as is our defect information that we've got to enter. These are customizable lists. We'll leave it a major, and we'll do a coding standard. And we'll add that as a review defect. We did have a question come in. What are the benefits of Collaborator over GitLab inbuilt review tool? That is a great question. So Collaborator gives you additional functionality as far as maintaining your database. You have some additional controls over the templates. So if you need, say, checklists, or you are concerned with certain individuals looking at particular code snippets, then you have options to set up templates to restrict who can see what code. You get a lot more control over who's actually looking at the code compared to the GitLab review tool or GitHub review tool. Don, did you have any additional comments on that?
Yeah, and traceability would be something that would be much more difficult to do and much more incomplete with a pull request workflow. And that's just kind of a requirement for some industries like healthcare, or I should say medical devices, building a flight system. I referenced those examples in the chat. So being able to like report on your code review and get data off of your code review is something that you can do very easily in Collaborator.
Thanks, John. All right, so we've marked up a defect and we've left some comments. We also have very tight integrations with Jira as well. So if you have items that you may want to address later on, we can add a note on these, say to unstack these variables, and we'll add this as a review minor defect for a coding standard. We'll add that review defect. And what we're going to see is an option to edit this, and we can create a new issue if we want to export this out to Jira or to TFS as well, or we can track this externally simply by adding in the project name that we want to associate this particular bug with. So I'll just give this one a known product, and this is where the integration is really cool with Jira. We actually just get a hyperlink directly out to Jira, and we can go out to that issue and make assignments as we need to. So stepping back out of our code, we can see the review defect log has been updated with our bugs, the defect in red, and our exported issue as blue, and code can't be moved to a completed state. Code review can't be moved to a completed state without or with any red bugs associated with the particular files. And that's with any files on the review. So if you had uploaded additional requirements documents that you'd marked up, any red defects would have to be resolved before we could move the review to a completed status. So I'll send this back to rework, and my author has just gotten a notice that the review is back in their court. So we can step back to the review, and we're going to see all this information updated on the author's account as well. And just to show you that functionality out to Jira, we can simply click on this hyperlink and go out to that issue and make assignments and begin work on this issue. And we also get those bidirectional links back out to Collaborator. And on the near horizon, we actually have some additional functionality coming with a new plugin for Jira that supports additional functionality with Collaborator. So be on the lookout for that as well if you're using Jira. So I'm going to go back out to my GitHub repository. And we'll make those updated changes on my dev branch. And we'll recommit this. So we can see the updated, and we could unstack these if we want to. We'll commit those changes and update our pull request. So we'll see that second update that we just committed just now. And what we'll see out in my review is a new version of the file has been uploaded. So we've got that newly updated file, and it tracks all of your hashes, your Git hashes, so you know exactly which version that we're looking at. and we can go ahead and send this back to inspection for my reviewer to pick up and complete. So with roles in Collaborator, you can make sure that your authors aren't marking their own defects as fixed. So you have complete control over what each of the individual roles can do within a review, and that's based on the templates. So we'll see that we have new information. The new version of the file was uploaded. We can see the same link to the pull request, and we can come back in and make some, look at our issues and mark those fixed as we need to. So we can see that this one has indeed been updated, and we select that defect. We can, I don't know why it's adding those multiple times. We can mark that as fixed. And we've got this one as well. If we reopen it, we can mark this one as fixed. Not sure why we're not seeing that one updated as fixed. Line 14, it has been marked fixed, yet my screen's not updating. Let's refresh this and see if it takes care of my bug for me. And yeah, there we go. It was just a screen refresh. The communication, when we talked about collaboration and how Collaborator brings that to your distributed teams, all this information is updated in near real time. So if you have multiple reviewers in looking at a particular review, all that information is going to be reflected in their views as well. I believe the default is about 15 seconds to update other users, but you're going to see all this information updated, and you're going to be on top of what's going on as if you were having a normal conversation. So with our defects marked as fixed, we can send this to a completed status. Now to talk a little bit about one of the other great tools in Collaborator, we're going to look at a little bit of reporting here. I can get a detailed report on this particular review that gives me all the metrics I need to look at for this review. And it gives us all the information from defects to time spent, so you can look at what your reviews are taking from your development time as far as a time sink for each of your reviewers. So you can have an understanding of what that looks like in your organization. You can export this as a PDF as well. We have some organizations that are doing that and actually attaching a copy of the review PDF into their artifact database just so they have that confirmation that reviews have been done. From a larger standpoint of collecting metrics, our reports tab lets you look at a variety of canned reports. We'll just take a quick look at our reviews currently in process, and we can look at all of the metrics that we would like to see. I'm just going to pick some line of code ones. If you're adding custom fields to your reviews, so say you need additional information based on your workflows, those items can show up as well. These are some custom fields that were added in a different template, and so they'll show up as options that we can search for in our reports. So Michael has a question. Approved through workflow. Can you explain how that works and the reasoning behind it? Also, as a large medical device company, it's a little painful to upgrade. We are currently at 12.301. And as we shift into more GitHub usage, should we be considering upgrading to 12.4 or a newer version? So I'm not sure I understand what you mean by approved through workflow. So we'll talk a little bit about and explain how that works and the reason behind it. Any thoughts on that, John, when we talk about approved through workflow?
I'm not sure either. Maybe, Michael, if you can just give us a little bit more details on what you mean by that. And maybe, I guess, what about specifically the workflow that you have questions on?
And I'm not sure when you're talking about the painful to upgrade the server. The server upgrade is actually fairly seamless when you download the new installation files, and our current version is 12.401. it's simply a matter of running the server installation files, and it will ask you if you want to upgrade your current installation. The only caveat might be whether or not your contract is still in maintenance and whether or not you can seamlessly do that upgrade. It may be worth a discussion with your account manager to determine that. And as we shift more into GitHub usage, should we be considering upgrading to 12.4? So with GitHub, we've been having some internal discussions about developing new functionality around GitHub. I don't have roadmaps for that, but we are looking very seriously at our GitHub integration and what we can do to improve those workflows. I don't know that 12.3 to 12.4 adds much additional functionality with GitHub. A lot of our more minor, the 12.4 release, the big one around that was around Azure DevOps work items. So much like you're doing issues in Jira, we added that functionality if you're using Azure DevOps as well. Oh, okay. So when someone accepts a review and then a bug is entered, but someone could also complete the review, there's a way that the person that created the bug can approve the bug, but the previous devs do not have to approve the bug as they already accepted the review. So in the basic workflow, if somebody, so say you've got multiple reviewers, for example, in the default roles, the reviewers, are you required to have one, but if multiple people are assigned as reviewers, all of those reviewers have to complete the workflow. So if somebody marks a defect, the only option that any other reviewer has if they pick it up would also be to send that back to rework. That's just the basic flow. If there's a defect marked, all the reviewers would either have to accept that defect and they could leave a comment on it. For example, they could go into the file itself, and if they wanted to leave comments on those files, they could certainly do that. They could come in and leave their own comments here as to whether or not they think a defect is actually a defect. You can even enhance that collaboration by leaving comments in the general chat window about particular defects, just to make sure that everybody's seeing those on the main page. But the workflow does apply to everyone. Now, with that caveat, say reviewer 1 does mark a defect. The author sees that in near real time. If the author is making code updates, they could refresh the file. They can make changes and refresh it and deal with that defect before the rest of the reviewers even get to the first look at the file. So there could be revisions in your code uploaded to Collaborator that would fix that defect before the other reviewers maybe even picked it up. So it depends on whether or not your workflow says, all right, I need to have all my reviewers look at it before adjustments can be made, but it can be tailored to your workflow. I hope that answers that question. So some of the other items in Collaborator, and I know we're coming up on about on the top of the hour, that can help you streamline your processes is through triggering. Collaborator comes with some built-in triggers that happen at different phases within the review, and you can write some scripts that do a little bit of extra automation for you. And that has become one of the biggest topics in most of the demonstrations that I've been doing with my customers, is how can we can incorporate Collaborator with some more automation in our process. So we're looking at what we might be able to do possibly for a webinar on that specific topic or some additional information on that specific topic in the near future. So be on the lookout for what you can do to integrate Collaborator in a more automated process. And with that covers our review workflow. That covers pretty much what I had wanted to talk today about feature demonstrations. And now I am open for additional questions and answers. There's a question from Robin in the chat. How do you see such a requirements document fitting into the Scrum product and sprint backlogs flows? Not sure. So requirements documents are typically put together around each sprint, what we expect to get out of the sprint. I didn't show, but I'm happy to give you a look at what requirements or what document review looks like in Collaborator. So for example, if you're putting out those requirements documents, I'm going to pull up one of our reviews that focuses on document review and show you what document review looks like. So it gives you that central repository for everybody to look at what they're expected to do. So with document review, you can upload your documents, and documents can be uploaded manually. They can be put into source control repositories, just like your code files, and you can do pull requests to generate those as well. As John mentioned, that's how our team works internally. Show you what a document review looks like. It's very similar to code review. It highlights deleted items in red, new information in green, but rather than marking individual lines, it uses a pushpin functionality. So if we wanted to mark a comment, we can simply drop in a pushpin by clicking on the document. It will start the conversation at that pin, and we can leave our comments. And we support document formats from Word, PDF, Excels. We support PowerPoints, graphic images. John mentioned exporting things like from Simulink in workflow diagrams. You can export those in PDFs. Show you what one of those looks like. You can upload all of these directly into Collaborator for document review as well. So again,
just some. Sorry, Mel.
No.
Just some thoughts on like requirements documents and the whole Scrum process and that kind of stuff. If some teams are just required to have requirements documents, like at the start of a project. Like I have a friend who works for ED, and right, so at the start of a project when they work on building a sub, they have to go through and say, this is everything that we're going to deliver in this sub, and it's not something that it's part of like kind of what the Navy is purchasing. So some teams just have to do things like that, and in that case, you still want to take an iterative approach to like working through that requirements document and cross-referencing things with requirements. Other teams that are building, let's say, a web app, they have a lot more freedom to break down requirements documents into, I guess not even have requirements documents, so it's stories and acceptance criteria and those types of things.
Sure. And I think a more direct answer to your question, Robin. So here on my diagram, with your product backlog, and this is how our team works internally, our product backlog builds in from customer requests, from support tickets, when we get defects identified and bugs that need to be addressed. We'll build up this product backlog. And then those requirements documents are introduced in that sprint planning phase before we push through. And that's when we would create those reviews around the requirements documents for what we're looking at on the upcoming sprints.
Yeah, in this picture here, requirements just means anything that says this is what you're doing this sprint. If that's a story, then it's a story off the product backlog. If it's a formalized requirements document, it's that thing. It's just anything that says this sprint, this is the stuff you're working on. It's whatever the sprint backlog is made out of.
All right, well, are there any additional questions? Please feel free to post those in the Q&A section or in the general chat. And share the slides. This presentation has been recorded, so we're happy to share that out when it comes available. And then finally, I just wanted to let everyone know our SmartBear Connect event is coming up near the end of this month on the 27th and 28th. It is a free virtual event, so please feel free to sign up. There is a host of presentations and speakers presenting on various SmartBear products and how you can use those to improve your environments and do your development, your API testing, and everything from web interfaces and UI testing. So sign up for that and get your free ticket. We'd love to see you there. And I would like to thank you for joining us today, and I hope you found the information useful. And if you need any further information, please feel free to reach out to us at SmartBear, and we'll get you taken care of. Thanks again, everyone.